Welcome back, everyone. I'm Aric from Rare Candy, and today I'm going to be counting down my picks for the top 10 best cards from the new Pokemon TCG set, Sword and Shield Evolving Skies. Now, there are over 200 cards in this set, so it does mean there are going to be some that don't quite make the cut, but I'm still going to squeak in a couple of honorable mentions before the countdown begins today, too. And there's still, I think, a handful of other cards in this set that do have competitive potential. So if you guys want to hear more about some of the other cards in this set, I did do a massive in-depth Evolving Skies set review. I'm going to have that link down below in the description if you guys want to hear some more in-depth thoughts about some of the other cards in this set as well. But before we get into the actual countdown, be sure to smack that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That way you'll stay up to date with the rest of my upcoming Evolving Skies content. And guys, we are so close to 25K here on YouTube, so every last sub really does go a long way at helping hit that goal. And in terms of the actual countdown, this is, of course, totally subjective, so let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section after this video ends, and let me know how your list might differ from mine. Maybe I ranked some cards a little too high, maybe I ranked some others too low. Let me know your full thoughts down below in the comment section. But with all that out of the way, let's head into the actual countdown and see my top 10 best cards from Evolving Skies. So for our first honorable mention, I'm going to give a shout out to Regidrago. This is going to be a single prize Pokemon, 130 HP, has 2 attacks, but the second one is really the one that makes this card somewhat special. For 2 grass and a fire energy, it does 240 minus 20 for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So I think Regidrago is a really cool card. I actually did a deck profile on it not too long ago. But basically, when you combine this card with Cherrim back from Battle Styles, you can actually get this card powered up in a single turn, doing 240 with just a single prize Pokemon. That's a great number to hit, as it will one-shot any 1 prize Pokemon, most 2 prize Pokemon, and comfortably 2-shot any Pokemon VMAX in the format. All you have to do is accelerate 2 grass energy from hand with Cherrim, and then attach a fire energy for turn to Regidrago to finish powering it up. I think this is actually one of the best new single prize attackers that we're getting in Evolving Skies, but there are a few reasons why it didn't quite make the top 10. Of course, the big issue with these dragon Pokemon is that they do have these clunky attack costs with multiple energy types. And while I think more often than not, you are going to be hitting for a flat 240 against most things with Regidrago, the fact that your opponent can play around this attack and do damage in a way that prevents you from doing damage to them is something that could hurt it against a number of different decks right now that can spread low amounts of damage to not take one-shots on this card. But with that being said, I still really like Regidrago, and it barely missed making the top 10 list. And for our other honorable mention, we have Glaceon VMAX, one of the many new evolution cards we're getting in Evolving Skies. And Glaceon VMAX is so cool because of this ability, Crystal Veil. You prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks of your opponent's Pokemon VMAX, excluding other Glaceon VMAX. And one of the things that does make Glaceon VMAX actually kind of good is actually Glaceon V. Its first attack, for 1 water energy, you search your deck for a card that evolves from this Pokemon and put it on this Pokemon to evolve it. Meaning that if you go second in a game and you can get your Glaceon V into the active spot with an energy, you can actually get out your Glaceon VMAX on turn 1 and start walling your opponent. And this ability is really good because, especially after the rotation, the game is going to be predominantly dominated by these different Pokemon VMAX, whether it's Eternatus or Rapid Strike Urshifu or Shadow Rider Calyrex. There's a ton of different Pokemon for your Glaceon to wall against. That being said, we do have to remember Path to the Peak is still a card that is very good against these sorts of abilities. Glaceon does have kind of a problematic weakness if you aren't able to find your Snow Leaf badge to get down and eliminate that weakness. And also, I think Glaceon just in general has a little bit of competition with Zamazenta V, which does a very similar thing as Glaceon, but debatably has a little bit more support in the form of things like Rusted Shield and Metal Saucer, and just naturally being a basic Pokemon does take up less deck space than something like Glaceon. So all these things are some challenges Glaceon might have to overcome before it does see widespread play, but nevertheless still a great ability and might just be enough to catapult Glaceon VMAX to seeing some play. But coming in at the number 10 spot, we have Pumpkaboo, which looks very puny and pathetic at first glance. 60 HP, just 2 colorless energy to do 20 damage. But the ability here, Pumpkin Pit, is really what makes Pumpkaboo, I think, a solid card. Whenever you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may use this ability and discard any stadium in play. So very similar to the reset hull Marshadow that we are losing in the rotation. But with that card on its way out, that does create a situation for Pumpkaboo to maybe come in and see some play. And even though Pumpkaboo doesn't discard itself after using this ability like Marshadow does, that also can still be a good thing at times, because if you're playing a deck that uses cards like Scoop Up Net, you can actually reuse the same Pumpkaboo over and over to keep removing stadium cards, unlike Marshadow, which would force you to play something like an Ordinary Rod or other similar recovery cards if you do want to reuse that ability. So the fact that it stays in play is kind of a double-edged sword, but I think this ability is still good enough to where Pumpkaboo is going to be a card that players are going to have to keep in the back of their mind. Marshadow saw a good bit of play throughout its lifespan, and I expect very similar things for Pumpkaboo. Coming in at number 9, we have another evolution that is going to be Leafeon VMAX. And not only is Leafeon VMAX a solid card, but also the base form Leafeon V has a really good ability that's worth pointing out. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for a grass energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon, but then your turn ends. And then Leafeon VMAX has the Grass Knot attack for a grass and colorless energy, doing 60 for each energy in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. So this works out really nicely. On turn 1, we can accelerate an extra energy for turn to our Leafeon V. Next turn, immediately evolve into Leafeon VMAX and be ready to go, and be able to start getting energy attachments down on future attackers if we do need to. And since we still have Galarmine in the format, even after the upcoming rotation, Leafeon VMAX is going to be able to hit pretty decently against a number of different decks. You know, most Pokemon out there have around 2 retreat cost, which means Leafeon's usually doing around 120 damage, which isn't great. But once you factor in things like Galarmine to increase that retreat cost, suddenly Leafeon is pretty consistently hitting over 200 damage with this attack just for 2 energy. And unlike some other Pokemon VMAX that can do similar amounts of damage for this energy cost, I think one of the things that Leafeon has going for it is the fact that it is reliant on Galarmine, which is a stadium card that can sometimes heavily disrupt your opponent, and that's an aspect to the theoretical Leafeon VMAX archetype that isn't present in other similar decks like Eternatus that can hit for similar amounts of damage. Of course, we also have the new Snowleaf badge to eliminate that retreat cost if we do have our own Galarmine in play, and also get rid of that pesky fire weakness in case we go get something like a Victini VMAX. So I think Leafeon VMAX does have to contend with a couple of these other 2 attachment Pokemon VMAX that can hit for very similar amounts of damage, like Eternatus, like Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX, but I still think there's a lot of support for this card. I'm happy to finally have another Leafeon that might be able to see some play. Coming in at number 8, we have Galarian Articuno. Galarian Articuno, of course, is a Psychic type basic, and the ability on this thing is really what makes this card so special. Whenever you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may attach 2 Psychic Energy cards from your hand to it. Now, Galarian Articuno does have an attack of its own that only requires 1 more additional energy to use, 120 to one of your opponent's Pokemon, but it does come at the cost of discarding all of your Psychic Energy. I think its ability is really what makes this card cool, because of course you can play this with things like Shadow Rider Calyrex to increase your damage output, since Shadow Rider does more damage for every Psychic Energy you have on your field. And with tag teams now leaving the format, I think that is going to put more of an emphasis on Alchemy VMAX as a potential partner for your Shadow Rider decks. And if you are planning on attacking with your Alchemy, whenever you bench Articuno, that's basically an extra 120 damage just from playing this card onto your field with this ability. And since Galarian Articuno is also just a normal single prize card, that means you can actually reuse this ability thanks to something like Scoop Up Net if you choose to as well. Now, of course, however, the downside to this, if you are playing this in a Shadow Rider deck, is the fact that normally you want to be using Shadow Rider's ability to help draw you cards while accelerating energy, whereas this does not. But there still can be turns for sure where you've already used your abilities and still have spare Psychic Energies left to get in play with Articuno, so there are still definitely turns where this could come up. But as a result, I am still wondering if this is going to become a staple in Shadow Rider decks, or be more of a 61st or 62nd card. But either way, I think there's a lot of potential for Galarian Articuno, and that's why it's coming in at the number 8 spot. Coming in at number 7, we have Medicham V, a new Rapid Strike Pokemon. And the first attack here is really the one that is worth pointing out. Has Yoga Loop for 2 colorless energy. You put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out by this attack at the end of your turn, you can take another turn, and this attack can't be used if any of your Pokemon used Yoga Loop on your last turn. So being able to take another turn in the Pokemon TCG is insane. The last time we had an effect kind of like this was on the Dialga GX. And even though that attack took a bit more energy than this, that was still your GX attack for game, meaning that the effect was so strong that the card limited you to just one use. And the fact that you can use this potentially 2 to 3 times in a game, I think really opens up Medicham to being a powerful one-up inclusion in Rapid Strike decks out there. Obviously, the big one that's going to come to mind is Rapid Strike Urshifu, and even though in the past Rapid Strike Urshifu's damage can sometimes be awkward, Medicham can of course use that to its advantage, being able to maybe pick off some previously damaged Pokemon with Yoga Loop and gain an extra turn in the process just seems really insane to me. I don't think we're going to see like a designated Medicham V deck or anything like that, but I think this attack is strong enough to warrant it a slot in a lot of different Rapid Strike decks out there, making it come in at the number 7 spot. Up next at number 6, we have Altaria, which is going to be our first Dragon-type Pokemon of the countdown, but it's a Stage 1 Pokemon with 90 HP, no weakness, no resistance, and no retreat cost, which all are pretty good. 90 HP means we can search out this evolution line with Level Ball. Free retreat, always a good thing as well. But the ability here is what makes this card so good. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for a supporter, reveal it, shuffle your deck, and then put that supporter on top of your deck. So very similar to the old Smooth Over Magcargo, which saw a ton of play both back during when it was first printed in EX Deoxys and also later in Celestial Storm as well. Now, of course, Magcargo did let you get any card that you wanted. Altaria is limited to just a supporter, but I don't think that is enough to stop this card from potentially being good, especially with so many ways right now in the format to just immediately draw that card we're putting on top of our deck. So of course, we still have the Primate Wisdom Oranguru, which means we can search a deck for maybe Professor's Research or maybe a Boss's Orders, then use that Primate Wisdom ability to replace a card in our hand with the top card of our deck, instantly drawing that supporter card. And another thing I really love about Altaria is that this actually gives decks a way to play some of those one of, maybe two of supporters that are normally very hard to draw into and really only good on specific turns. I think that's something just in general the format has really been needing. So if you were a deck of the past that just kind of relied on Professor's Research, Marnie, and Boss, if you're playing a deck that uses Altaria, now you can suddenly maybe throw in a couple copies of the new Raihan or other similar supporter cards that you only want on very select turns of the game. So I'm really excited to see what Altaria does for supporter lines of the decks that can make use of this card. Next up at number 5, we have Suicune V, which actually does kind of tie into the Altaria we just mentioned here. But Suicune's going to be a basic water type Pokemon that has an ability that says once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may use this ability, draw a card. And then a single attack for a water and colorless energy does 20 plus 20 more for each benched Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. I think Suicune has the potential to be a really solid backup 2-prize attacker in Ice Rider Calyrex decks, because this attack can be powered up in a single turn with Melanie and 1 attachment from hand. And now you can soften up your opponent while potentially only giving up 2 prizes instead of 3, which might be able to force your opponent into some occasionally 8-prize games in your Ice Rider Calyrex decks. And also just gaining an ability like this to net you an extra card every turn can sometimes make a huge difference. Slap down an air balloon on Suicune V, and every time your opponent takes a knockout, be able to promote your Suicune, instantly guarantee yourself an extra card every turn, and then retreat into what you want to actually attack with, or maybe not even, maybe you do want to attack with your Suicune. And with the new Altaria that we actually just looked at, that could be a good partner for Suicune as well, because you can put a supporter, potentially a Melanie even, on top of your deck, then immediately draw it with this fleet-footed ability. So even though Suicune doesn't have some of the shock value of some of the other Pokemon V and VMAX that are on this list, I think there is a lot of utility in this card, and I fully expect it to see play, which is why it's going to land at the number 5 spot. Coming in at number 4 is Raihan, and this is personally one of my favorite cards, as you can tell by being so high on this list, but just in terms of the play style of this is right up my alley. It's a supporter card that says you can only play this card if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. But then you choose 1 basic energy from your discard pile and attach it to one of your Pokemon, and search your deck for any 1 card and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So actually kind of similar to cards like Rosa or Teammates of the past, where you gain access to a very strong effect if your opponent is pulling ahead in the game here. If we look back at Rosa, that was a card that we are losing in the rotation that saw a good bit of play in single prize decks. And unlike Rosa, Raihan actually lets you attach energy, whereas Rosa just gets it to hand. And even though this is one less card than Rosa, being able to search your deck for any one specific card sometimes might even be better than what other cards like Rosa of the past have allowed for. I think single prize decks are going to have a field day with this throughout this card's lifespan, which is something I'm really excited for. But even coming out of Japan, we've already seen a couple of multi-prize decks also making use of this, thanks to cards like Inteleon or Altaria that can easily find this on the turns that you need it. So I think Raihan is a slam dunk of a card, one of my absolute favorites from the set. Maybe even my favorite card of the set, just in terms of play style, even though I think there are some cards obviously on this list that are probably objectively a little bit more impactful. But yeah, great supporter card. That's why it's coming in at the number 4 spot. Next up, we have Stormy Mountains, a new stadium card that says once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a basic lightning or dragon Pokemon and put it on their bench. Then that player shuffles their deck. So if you guys played at all during the Sun and Moon era, you might remember a little card called Brooklet Hill, which basically did this exact same thing, but for water and fighting Pokemon. And that was a card that once it caught on, basically saw play all the way up until it rotated, and was one of the best stadium cards in the formats that it existed in. And I don't see any reason why Stormy Mountains would be anything different, especially in this set. We are getting the new Rayquaza VMAX and Flaffy, which might be safe to assume are also going to appear in one of these last 2 spots. But this basically ensures that any lightning or dragon deck is going to have a lot of consistency boosting options for getting their deck set up. I mean, and we even saw Brookwood Hill pop up in weird decks that normally wouldn't want to play it. Think of like Volcanion EX, which was a dual water and fire type. We even saw some decks making use of Brookwood Hill just to be able to search out that one Pokemon in their deck. So not only are we going to see Stormy Mountains pop up in these very blatant and obvious ways like with Rayquaza, but we even still could see it pop up in some other decks to guarantee very key and specific cards. Stormy Mountains is a very straightforward card, but I think this effect is very good, and the historical precedent is there for this card to see widespread play throughout its time in the standard format. Coming in at number 2, I am going to kind of cheat here. We have Rayquaza VMAX and Flaffy together, and kind of just pairing these together because that's really the main context people are thinking about these cards currently. I'm sure far down the road there will be some other partners for Flaffy, but for right now, these cards are kind of chained together in terms of their playability. But yeah, Rayquaza is the main mascot of Evolving Skies for very good reason here. Has this ability that allows you to discard all cards from your hand and draw 3, which does stack if you have multiple Rayquaza VMAX in play. And then a very powerful attack for a fire and lightning energy. You may discard any number of either your basic fire energies or your basic lightning energies, and this attack does 80 more for each energy discarded in this way. Meaning that if you discard 4 energies from your Rayquaza, you can one-shot any Pokemon VMAX in the format, except for if they have something like a pesky Big Charm or full Face Guard on their Pokemon to deny that knockout. But by and large, this is going to be able to nuke anything in its path. And with Flaffy being a spiritual successor to the old Electric with the same Dynamotor ability, we'll be able to recharge Rayquaza VMAX pretty much every turn to knock out anything in its path. So I was a little bit torn on if this should be our number 1 spot or number 2 spot. I definitely think there will be a little bit of controversy with that. But I think the reason I am going to settle with Rayquaza at the number 2 spot, despite it being such an inherently powerful card, is because we really don't have any good bench protection right now. And if you are able to pick off Rayquaza's Flaffies, it can be very difficult for them to chain those one-hit KOs. And there are a few good spreaders, most notably Rapid Strike Urshifu, in the upcoming post-rotation format, with nothing to stop it from wreaking havoc on your bench. But this is still an immensely powerful pair of cards that we're looking at, and that's why it's going to come in all the way at the number 2 spot. And coming in at the number 1 spot, probably a little bit predictably, we have Umbreon VMAX. So while Umbreon VMAX doesn't possess the raw strength of something like Rayquaza VMAX, it has an insane ability. Once during your turn when you play this card from hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active. So yes, this is just boss's orders, but in the form of an ability. But gusting effects in the Pokemon TCG have been some of the most powerful effects in the entire game. Whether it's the original Gust of Wind or Pokemon Catcher before it was errated, or Luxray level X, or even a little bit more recently, Lycanroc GX, we've had a ton of gusting effects that have honestly kind of defined the formats that they've existed in. And Umbreon VMAX has a lot of potential because there are a lot of decks right now that I think could be eyeing this down. Obviously, the big one is going to be Eternus VMAX. That is a deck that naturally just wants nice bench sitters in play anyways. And Umbreon VMAX does a great job at just sitting on your bench, powering up your Eternus, while allowing you to chase down the exact targets that you want to attack into. We've seen some early talk of Victini VMAX being able to use this to help chase down easy Pokemon V to take one-shots on. We could even see Melanie-based decks make use of this to be able to still gust while using their Melanie supporters every turn. Or because Umbreon is a single strike Pokemon, there is still a chance that we could see a designated Umbreon VMAX deck as well, because Houndoom can accelerate single strike energies to this, while also buffing its attack to take one shots on not only low HP bench sitter Pokemon like Crobat, but also to comfortably 2-hit KO any VMAX in the game. And with a lot of dark Pokemon like Umbreon having their weaknesses changed to grass instead of fighting in the Sword and Shield era of the game, I think that also opens up a chance for Umbreon to be good, because things like Urshifu that are so popular can't easily one-shot this thing. So Umbreon VMAX, this is an insane card. Again, I know Rayquaza has a little bit more shock value built right into its attack, but I think there is a ton of utility for Umbreon. And like I said, gusting effects are just inherently some of the strongest effects that can be printed in the Pokemon TCG. So for those reasons, Umbreon is going to come out on top as the best card from Evolving Skies, in my opinion. And with that, guys, we have made it to the end of today's countdown video. I feel like my number 1 and 2 picks are going to be a little bit controversial here, so I'm definitely curious what you guys are thinking. Did you think Rayquaza deserved to be the top card in this countdown, or do you think I was fair with Umbreon? Or are there any other cards that didn't make it onto this list that you think I should have included? Let me know your full thoughts down below in the comment section. And if you guys are thinking about picking up any Evolving Skies product or cards, you can check out our friends at flipsidegaming.com and use that coupon code RARECANDY at checkout to save yourself some money on your order. And all of our patrons actually have their own exclusive discount code over there for even bigger savings. Or on the flip side, no pun intended, you can also check out our friends at tcgplayer.com if Flipside is out of stock of what you're looking for, or maybe you're just a little bit more familiar with TCG Player as a company. I have an affiliate link with them down below in the description. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys. If you did enjoy this countdown, of course, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications to stay up to date with the rest of my Evolving Skies content. And if you want to take your support to the next level, you can also become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or pick up some merch over at rarecandytcg.com. It would mean a lot. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.